Hello, I'm Alice. There's a lot of different menus you'll be using when playing Star Wars Galaxies, and there's not enough time to cover all of them in detail in one video, so I'll just briefly go over the ones you'll be using most often. I'll also briefly show how to buy stuff from the Bazaar and introduce crafting. So to start with, I'm going to look at these icons in the lower right hand corner of my screen. This opens all of the various menus that are available to you. The second one from the left is the Planetary Map, or V is in Victor by default. This is where you can go to find out where stuff is. For example, if you're looking for a trainer, you can find waypoints to the basic types of trainers here. The trainers for the advanced professions will not be listed on this list, but in most towns you can find them nearby the relevant basic profession trainer that is listed here. You'll also find waypoints to vendors and the various terminals that are available for getting missions. So let's say we want to go to the bank. We can right click on this and make a waypoint. And that'll create a waypoint in your datapad, which is this little circly icon in the center, or K by default. When you create a waypoint to another building in the same town, it's going to have the exact same name, so you'll end up with two waypoints that just say Mos Eisley as the name. So you should rename this so you know what it is before you make another waypoint to another building in the same town. I'll just add bank to the name so I know it's the bank and activate the waypoint. Also, under the datapad, you'll find your missions under waypoints as well when you accept missions from the mission terminal. And then under data, you'll find things like your speeder, your vehicles, your pets. Once you have hatched the pets, they'll show up in here. And then draft schematics, all the schematics that you've learned will be in here. And if you make your own schematic, you'll also see those in here later when you start using factories. The next one I want to cover is your skills, the lightning icon, or U by default. Under skills, you'll notice that when you start out, you get novice in every basic profession. Each of those lead to several possible advanced professions. For example, as an entertainer, you can be an image designer, a musician, or a dancer. When you select novice from one of these professions and look at the bottom, you'll see that it took 15 of your skill points just to learn this profession. There's 250 total skill points you can use, so each of these basic professions used up quite a few. When you flesh out your build for whatever professions you want to learn, you'll find that you'll need to unlearn most of these basic professions in order to have enough skill points to go around. A great way to figure out what you have enough skill points to learn is to use the skill calculator. If you go back to the SWG Restoration Launcher, there's a link to it there. In one of my other videos, which I'll give a link to in the description, I've covered an example of using the skill calculator, so I won't go into that in detail here. When you're learning your skills, you typically want to learn an entire tree rather than learning one box from each tree. This is because it'll allow you to become more effective. For example, if we go to Sharpshooter, which in earlier versions of Star Wars Galaxies was called Marksman, and then under Rifles, you'll see that we learn defense, accuracy, and speed in rifles. And as you learn each of these boxes, you get more points in those areas. Whereas if you did rifles and pistols, you'd get a few points in each of those, but you wouldn't be very good at either one. You'll find similar effects with any of the other professions you choose. Another somewhat related menu is secondary professions. That's this third icon from the left, the little black one next to the lightning symbol, or P by default. These professions don't count against the skill point limit, so you can master both of these all the way up without having to worry about what else you can learn. And then your inventory is this icon next to the little cup, or I by default. Couple things about your inventory to note is you have this screen on the right side that shows your character, and this one on the left that shows details of whatever item you selected. You can get rid of those by clicking these little arrows if you want. Also, you can see a sorted list of your inventory. Just click Change View so you have this view, and then click on whichever column you want to sort it by. But note that when you go back to the previous view, it does not stay sorted like that. And then under community, there's a couple things that you'll want to look at here. Number one, if you are role-playing, under character, you'll find the biography. This is the primary place where you can put information to your other people. Also, if you're looking for a group, you can come in here and check looking for a group so other people know you're looking for a group. That also allows people to find you if they go to search for someone that wants a group, based on the boxes that you checked here. And when you're adding friends, you will likely not be able to add a comment at the same time as adding a new friend. So just put the name in and click add, and then afterwards you may need to go in and re-add your comment and modify. Also note the names here are case sensitive. And next, the ability screen is this little orange icon, the third one from the right, or semicolon by default. Any abilities that are active skills, like the ones listed on the Combat tab, can be dragged onto your toolbar, and then you can press the corresponding button to cast it from your keyboard or by clicking on it with your mouse. If you want to remove one of these, just right-click on it and remove, or you can move them elsewhere. Also, when you select one of these, in the description at the bottom, you'll see a command line version of how to run that. This is important if you're going to be using a macro because you'll need the command line version to type in here. And then the last thing I'll mention here is how to get this on-screen waypoint monitor that I'm looking at here visible. If you go to settings, which is the little wrench, and then under interface, if you scroll down, there's a link that says on-screen waypoint monitor. Next, I'll show you how to search for an item a player is selling on the Bazaar. For that, we'll first need to find one. In most NPC cities, you'll find a Bazaar either in or near the bank. The bank in this town happens to be close by the starport where I'm currently at. So I'm going to show a different way of finding the building that doesn't require the use of a waypoint. There's an on-screen map. By default, it's the letter M, as in map. And if you press the control key and move your scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. And when we are zoomed out all the way, if I move this chat screen out of the way, we can see the bank is this kind of square building here at the bottom center. So now I'll just walk over there. Okay, and this is the bank. The Bazaar are these red terminals here. You can search for items within your current town, the whole planet, or the whole galaxy. Let's say I'm interested in buying some armor. I'll click on one of these bone armors, and let's say I'm interested in all the armors that have 5,000 kinetic protection or higher. To start with, I'll select the arm armor specifically, and then if you check this box to enable the item attribute filter, we can now add a filter for kinetic protection. And I'll just set this to 5,000 to some big number. If you want to make sure this attribute, you only see items that actually have this attribute, check this box, and then add it to the list in the middle. And now it filtered the results. Now when you're purchasing this, if it happens to be up for sale in the same location that you are, then it should go to your inventory automatically. If it's an auction, you'll have to wait till the auction is over. And if you bought an item that is up for sale in a different location, you just need to find a Bazaar in that location, and you'll find it under available items after you've purchased it and went to the Bazaar in that location. You can also search for items that players are selling on their vendors from vendor location here. the same way. Lastly, I'll give a short demonstration on crafting. To get started, you'll need a crafting tool. You should have started with this generic one in your inventory. Sometimes you may not be able to find the schematic you're looking for listed on your crafting tool. This can happen for a few reasons. First, check to see if you've learned the schematic already by going to your Datapad and the Draft Schematics tab, where you'll find all the schematics you've learned. If what you're looking for isn't listed here, you can check which skill box teaches it to you by going to your skills page, view by default or the little lightning button on your menu, and under each skill box, you'll find a list of the skills and schematics that it teaches you. The components required by a given profession schematic might not always be from the same profession. For example, to add storage space to a crafting station, an architect needs storage components from a droid engineer. Most schematics require a specialized crafting tool and will only show up from the correct tool. Note, the crafting tool needed to make a given profession schematic might not always be the same. For example, while a shipwright mostly uses the Starship crafting tool, some components use the weapon droid and generic crafting tool. That's the specialized version of the tool I'm using now. Some recipes will require you to be standing next to a crafting station and won't show up on the tool unless you are. You'll find these in most NPC cities, sometimes by the starport. And sometimes you need to be standing next to a player-made crafting station. These are sometimes referred to as private crafting stations, even though you can often find them in public houses in player cities. Let's say I want to make this food and chemical crafting tool. To do that, I'll need some mineral, some metal, which is a type of mineral, and some chemical. If I already had a specialized crafting tool and I was standing next to a crafting station, I would be able to increase the tool's effectiveness through experimentation. How high the effectiveness is before experimentation, the quality, is determined 100% by the resource's conductivity. Most schematics will require the resource to be high in multiple stats, and which ones will vary on the schematic. In that case, the percentages here will reflect which stats on the resource have the most impact to the quality. To get these resources, you can buy them from the Bazaar, or we can survey for them and collect them ourselves. To start with, you only have a mineral survey device, so this crafting tool isn't a good option to start with. Instead, let's select the chemical survey device, which requires only metal and mineral. So open the mineral survey device and find the metals. I'll try searching for this first one, but you can't survey in a building, so I go outside. The percentage here is kind of low. This affects how much of the resource you're going to collect each time, and if it's too low, there's a good chance you won't find anything. So I'm going to try to find one that's a little higher. Okay, this one's quite a bit higher, so I'll go with this one. So I'll just hit Get Sample here, and I don't remember how much of the resource we needed, so let's just double check that. Go back to our survey device, and we need 8, 16, 24, 27. So now I'll just wait until I get 27 steel. Sometimes you'll get these survey events. When this happens, if you select it, you'll have a chance of getting a higher amount of resource here. All right, I've got a little more than is needed now, so I'll just press W, my forward key, to stand up and stop sampling. You may have noticed from the chat screen that I'm not getting very much resource at a time. This is in part because of the percentage here, but also I'm just starting out, so my skills in surveying are really low. As you level up each of these surveying boxes, you'll increase how much you get each sample a little bit, and it'll also allow you to increase the range that you're able to survey in. So as you learn each of these boxes, you'll need to come back to the survey tool and set your range. You can also increase how much you sample each time a little bit through other means, such as buffs from entertainers and specialized droids. So let's craft our survey device now. Back to our crafting tool and miscellaneous. Select the survey device and continue. You can double click on these, or if you need to put a specific resource in each slot, you can click and drag. This will be helpful with the more advanced recipes where you may need to put a different mineral on different slots in order to increase the effectiveness. For example, if we take a look at the right section here, there's a number in red, 146. The red here indicates this is really low, and this is indicating how high the quality is going to be for the experimental effectiveness, and it reflects the percentage shown here. So with the resources all added, we can go ahead and continue crafting. Since I'm not using a specialized tool and not standing next to a crafting station, I don't have the option to experiment or create a schematic that will allow me to mass produce this in a factory using the same exact resources. As a result, my effectiveness is going to be stuck at 1%, and later on, I'm probably going to want to make a better tool. Once you get to the customization screen, you're likely going to want to check practice mode while you're leveling up. This will increase how much experience you get from each craft. You'll also make it so the item doesn't actually get created. It will still use the resources. I need this item because I need to be able to find some chemical to make my crafting tool, so I'm going to go ahead and not check that box. And you'll notice a number at the top of the crafting tool. That indicates how long you have to wait for the item to be created. If your inventory was full, the item would stay in the crafting tool and you'd have to free up space to use the tool. It's done now. One last thing you may want to consider when leveling up is the schematic you choose to craft. It'll vary on profession, and you may have to do some experimentation to find out which one works the best, but there are two things you can consider. Each schematic has a complexity rating, and this will have some impact on how much experience you get. But perhaps more important is the number of the different types of resources required to craft the item. A schematic that requires only one or two different types of resources may give you less experience than one that requires 3 or 4 different types of resources, even if it has a higher complexity rating. For example, the chemical survey device requires resources for 4 different things, but all of them are the same type of resource because they're all found from a mineral survey device. And I think that's enough for today. Thank you.